heard about a giant trash island in the ocean? Or that poor sea turtle and the straw? Maybe you've even heard how plastic is being found inside the fish we eat. The plastic crisis gets a lot of attention, but the headlines usually focus on the plastic that ends up in the environment. And that's just part of the story. The truth is, plastic has a whole life cycle that's hidden from view, one that harms people and the planet from start to finish. Let's start at the beginning. Plastic is made from fossil fuels like oil or fracked natural gas. Extracting those fossil fuels and turning them into plastics creates a lot of pollution. Pollution that most often affects marginalized communities nearby. As we've gotten better about using less oil and gas to power our lives, the fossil fuel industry found a lifeline in plastics. In fact, oil and gas companies are doubling down on plastic production, with plans to build or expand over 300 petrochemical plants in the US alone by 2025. But these companies already produce more plastic than we can use. So where's all that plastic going? A lot of it's flowing into new markets, in places like Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Because more than any other product category, plastic isn't driven by the demand for it, but by the supply. Corporations like Unilever, Nestle, and Procter & Gamble are aggressively marketing single-use
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you for coming. We will be starting in a very short while. We'll wait for about 5 minutes or so for others to join us. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening once again, wherever you are joining us from. And thank you for coming. My name is Dr. Anderson Iswa, and I will be moderating today's session. So welcome to the AFRICER webinar series. And today's topic is going to be on plastic waste management in Africa. We have a lot lined up for today. It's going to be a very interesting session where we get to learn more about waste management. We learn more about plastic waste management. We learn more about strategies that are in place on the continent regarding how to effectively manage plastics waste. We will be starting with a welcome and opening remarks by the lead of the AFRICER team. We'll then follow with the introduction of our panelists or our guests for today. We would also go on and let our guests give their opening statements, which would be on topics that are related to this particular theme that we have in the webinar. Then we will screen a video, plastics, just to give us a bit of context regarding plastic waste management, how it started, how it evolved, and how things are going around the world and also on the continent. We'll then follow that up with a little poll. We would like to hear from you what is happening in your country. Is there any laws that ban plastic waste? Where are you at? Are you in the developing stages? Have you already developed it? Are you enforcing it? We would like to hear from you regarding what's really happening. We will then move to the center of attention for today, the panel discussion, where our three panelists will be sharing their opinions, their ideas, their knowledge with us. They will be answering questions that we have. And we would like to hear from you as well. We would like to see you Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Welcome to the AFRICER webinar series, which is the Africa Eco Research Reports webinar series. Today's topic is on plastic waste management in Africa. We actually have lots lined up for today's webinar. It's going to be a panel discussion. And we would also like to hear from you regarding questions that you would have for our panel, so you can get a response from them. We've lined it up such that there will be a welcome address by the lead of the AFRICER team. And then we would move on to introduction of our guests. We will move then to our guests' opening remarks. And these opening remarks would center on topics that is related to the theme for today's webinar. After that, we would screen a video that tells us the history of plastics, how it's evolved, and the challenges that we have in now. After that, we would move to a little poll, about a minute or two poll, where we'd like to hear from you. We'd like to hear what your country is doing. Do you have a plastic waste management ban in place? Are you now developing it? Are you enforcing it? We'd like to hear from you regarding what your country is doing. Then we'll move to the center of attention for today. That is a panel discussions. And as earlier said, we would have questions for our guests to speak about, and we would like to have your questions as well. If you can put your questions in the chat, that would be great. We have someone who is collating all these questions, and then we would ask the panelists to share their opinions, thoughts, and ideas on that. Then we would conclude today's webinar, hoping that you take home the key message that is regarding plastic waste management. My name is Dr. Anderson Iswa, and I will be your moderator for the webinar. So to get us going, I'm going to call on Mr. Gideon Deme to give us the welcome and opening remarks. Gideon, if you are ready, please take it from here.
Yeah, I'm ready. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah.
Oh.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Echo Ahmed AFRICER webinar series, the second of it. And today's webinar, as Anderson have already introduced, will center on plastic waste management in Africa. Anderson, can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah. Okay. Like I said, next
Did
slide.
I skip?
Yeah, skip. Okay. Echo Ahmed is an environmental consulting company that it's made with the head office in Ghana. AFRICER is a project that is being taken up by a group of research teams across the globe, basically from the African continent, but staying and living in other places. Next slide, please. Next, Anderson.
Yeah. Gideon?
But next, I said next slide.
Okay.
Yeah, so like we have said, the projected current plastic waste in Africa from this study have shown that in 2015, we had about 100 million tons of plastic waste burden across different countries in the continent. Continuously, we have increasingly have the burden. In 2020, it increased to about 150 million tons. However, from this study, it has been projected that by 2040, we will be having about 500 million tons of plastic waste across the continent. And by 2060, we will be hitting the 1 billion metric tons of plastic waste across the continent. However, does it look as if the continent doesn't do anything about plastic waste management? Not at all. Maybe we will see in the next slide, Anderson. Now, in this slide, you could see that across the 50, you are not hearing me? Hello, can you hear me, Anderson? Somebody said they can't hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, let me continue. Now we have about 34 countries that have already developed different policies of plastic waste, with basically the ban policy on the single plastic waste. And some countries, just 3 out of, have the levy as an alternative. And the implementation of these plastic waste management have mostly been at the national level, with a few countries implementing it at the regional level. Now, you could see that even though we have the ban on the single plastic waste, Africa is still growing in the burden for the plastic. So now the big question. Next slide. The big question is, if we have all these bans in place and the national is implementing, have these policies really been implemented? If they are we missing some strategies? Or during the development of these policies, did we miss some key things that we should have taken into cognizance? Or rather, have the locals, who are basically some of the key contributors of the plastic waste burden, been left out in the implementation of the management strategies? Now, this next slide, this webinar seeks to address some of these concerns and key addresses, with the key focus on: one, we want to discuss the current plastic waste management approaches and policies across the Africa. as a continent. And we also, in this webinar, we seek to examine how these policies on plastic waste management that we currently have can be applied at the local level. And if we examine how they can be applied at the local level, what other alternatives do we need to consider when we want to develop or enforce some of these plastic waste bans that we have across the continent? Next slide. Now, you could see that from this webinar, we have some good stuff to talk about so that at the end of the day, we will all be stakeholders and we will all be involved in the management of this plastic waste. For more information on the AFRICER project, which we've done some things and we are still going to do some things, here are some of the links where you will log in or interact with us, and we will be there to discuss with you. Maybe the moderator is going to send some of these links to the chat box so that we can have access to. Thank you, Anderson. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Gideon, for your very warm welcome and the background information that you've given us. Next, we will go to Mr. Felix Joe-Ado, who is also a member of the AFRICER team, to introduce our guests. Felix?
Thank you, Anderson. Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us this morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on your geographical location. So just as Anderson said, I'm Felix Ado and a member of the AFRICER team, and I have the singular honor of introducing our distinguished guest. Our first speaker is Ms. Gloria Majiga Kamoto. Gloria is an environmental policy advocate working with a local NGO on the governance of Malawi's mining, land, climate change, and agricultural sector. She is passionate about civic engagement and participation in meaningful democratic processes. She is the fuel which she fuels through her communication and leadership practice. Concerned about the environmental harm caused by mounting plastic pollution in Malawi, Gloria fought the plastics industry and galvanized grassroots movement supporting a national ban on thin plastics, a type of single-use plastic. As a result of her dedicated campaigning in July 2019, Malawi's High Court upheld the ban on the production, importation, distribution, and use of thin plastics. She is a bubbly personality and enjoys a good conversation about anything. She's a proud mother who aspires to raise her son to live a purpose-driven life by showing him that it can be done. Welcome, Gloria, and thank you for joining us.
Okay. Gloria, can you give us a wave so we can see you? There she is. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that introduction. I'm very honored to be here this afternoon, and welcome to everybody that's in this conference. We're looking forward to a very engaging conversation about plastics in Africa.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gloria. Yeah.
Thank you, Gloria. Mr. Juvenal Mukurarinda is the second guest speaker. Juvenal is a senior officer for sustainable waste management at Global Green Growth Institute, JGJI. He supports the implementation of waste to resources, improving municipal solid waste and hazardous waste management in Rwanda. This is a 3-year project funded by the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg, led by the Ministry of Environment of the Government of Rwanda and implemented by JGJI. Juvenile holds a Master of Science in Environmental Sanitation from Ghent University, Belgium, and has over 9 years of experience in the wash and environment sector. He is more adaptable in sustainability, planning, project, studies design, and implementation. Before joining JGJI, Juvenile had the opportunity to work with different institutions, including the Ministry of Infrastructure, research organizations, local NGOs, and the academia. He is currently venturing into waste and circular economy, seen as a future game changer for efficient resources and environmental protection. You are welcome, sir.
Juvenile, can you give us a wave so we can know who you are? There he is. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I'm actually truly humbled to be part of this platform today, and I actually look forward to a very good discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Juvenile. Last but not least is Ms. Bezawit Eshetu. Bezawit has more than 15 years of experience in policy dialogues and program management under the auspices of different UN agencies and the private sector in Africa. Specific areas of focus are environmental management, sustainable development, waste management, resource efficiency, cleaner production, green growth, circular economy, and impact investment. She is currently working at African Circular Economy Network as Ethiopia's representative. She is excited to be part of these dialogues as they create a platform for collaboration and partnership. With more than half of its population below the age of 25, Ms. Eshetu believes innovation and entrepreneurship are the key enablers to push the circular transformation in Africa. Ms. Bezawit Eshetu, thank you for accepting to share your thoughts with us, and you're welcome.
Bezawit, okay, there she is.
Yes. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here this afternoon with you, and I look forward for fruitful engagement. Pleasure to be here again.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Bezawit. So, ladies and gentlemen, I present you our distinguished speakers, and I ask that we give our full attention as they share their expert view on plastic waste management in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Felix. Very good job done. And as Felix has said, our panelists have years of experience in plastic waste management and waste management in general, advocacy, research. So they have lots to share with us today. They have a lot of ideas, a lot of information to provide. And we are hoping that this would be an engaging webinar where you get to ask questions that you had before coming on, where you hopefully get responses to the questions that you do have. So I'm going to invite our guests, all panelists, to give their opening statements. And I'm going to start with Ms. Gloria Majiga Kamoto, and she would be speaking on factors to consider before a country bans single-use plastic. That would be her opening statement. Ms. Majiga Kamoto, if you are ready, please, let's go.
Thank you, Anderson. No matter how long we have been doing this Zoom thing for, it's still always quite a problem sometimes. But I'm quite honored to be here, as I have said, and very excited to be starting off the conversation And the question that I was asked to speak on as my opening statement was to discuss the factors to consider before banning plastics. Now, I want to start my discussion by raising a very important issue, the importance of plastics. Plastic is a global challenge, but it's also been a solution to a lot of the different challenges and problems in the modern world. I think we can all appreciate that even just for us to have this webinar, it's because some of the technologies that we're using are plastic. Even maybe if you look around just where you're sitting, you find that quite a lot of things within your, and so not the issue is that we don't believe or we don't advocate for plastic and we don't understand the importance of plastic. But I think that one thing we can appreciate is how much of a revolutionary material it is. Unfortunately, if we look at the different statistics globally, we'll find that the multiplication of production of plastic has been extremely unsustainable. For example, in 1950, the world over was producing about 2 million tons a year. And if you look at the statistics from 2015, we're looking at 381 million tons per year. And that's an increase of almost 200-fold. It's completely unsustainable. And if you look at how this plastic is managed, statistics have also shown that a very huge percentage of these plastics, for example, in 2015, about 55% of the plastics that are produced are discarded and 25% are incinerated, which also contributes to greenhouse gas emissions, and only 20% of all the plastic produced is recycled. So there's been a lot of discussion on how we are managing the plastic problem as a global community. But one thing that we can agree on is that this management, it has mostly been on paper, because if we're discarding 55%, we should ask ourselves where this discarded waste is going to. It is within our environment, it is within our communities, it's within our rivers, it's in the oceans, it's in almost everywhere that we look around us. It's in the atmosphere as microplastics, as visible plastics, it's in the food that we eat, it's in just about everything that we can encounter as human beings on this earth and within our continent. Now, the response to the plastic problem across the world has come in different forms. There's been a lot of proposals, there's been conventions such as the Basel Convention that eventually also included plastic waste. But one thing that has probably been advocated the most across different countries is the ban of single-use plastics. There's also been other alternatives, such as the setting up of recycling facilities, bringing in of innovations where you have different materials that are degradable, where you also have introduction of different principles that relate to the polluter pays principle, such as extended producer responsibility, as well as levies on specific types of plastics. But I'd like to discuss the issue of the ban on thin plastics, particularly because in 2015, Malawi became the 11th country at the time to ban single-use plastics. And this ban was on all plastics that are less than 60 microns. What this ban meant was that all companies that are producing plastics less than 60 microns were no longer allowed to produce. They were no longer allowed to distribute, and consumers were no longer allowed to buy this product. And as we speak now, this ban continues to be in place, although it has been contested by different companies. Now, when we think about setting up of a plastic ban, what really needs to be considered before a country like Malawi, a country like Ethiopia, does enforce a plastic ban? The first is the relevant challenge that you're addressing with the plastic ban. As I've said, there are different problems that we're encountering, whether it's the management of the actual plastic waste or the toxicity of the waste and where it's ending up. Now, for most countries, because we do not have the systems in place to manage the waste effectively, the ban has been a way of closing the tap, which has been regarded as the most effective way. Because if you cannot produce plastics that can be recycled, then the current drive and the advocacy content is that it should be completely banned. Hence why a country like Malawi can push towards the ban of single-use plastics, because they cannot be recycled and the end user simply discards them, and beyond that, there's not much use for them. So the first thing to consider is whether you've got the systems in place. However, a ban can only be supported if you've got the institutional framework to actually enforce the ban. So there's one thing that we're very famous for as African countries is that we tend to have very beautiful policies, very beautiful laws, but in terms of enforcement, we tend to have that weakness because we don't have the institutional setup. Now, banning plastics, it's easy to issue a ban on plastics, but who will go around and ensure that the companies are not producing the plastic? Who will ensure that the confiscated plastics are managed in a way that can actually not be taken back into the environment, in a way that's not degrading to the environment? So these are some of the things that tend to be overlooked prior to the enforcement or the development of a single-use plastics ban. The second is also the porosity of borders. Now, it's not a blanket ban. Most of the bans have happened at country level, and each country has the sovereignty to decide on how they'll manage the plastic problem. And so we find often that a country may ban plastic, but their neighbors may not ban specific types of plastic. So if the borders are porous, it still means that there's still quite a lot of movement of toxic and harmful plastics between the two countries, which means that you have not completely shut off the problem. So how do we consider this issue? The first is, of course, to think about how, as an African continent, we can work together to actually address the issue of single-use plastics, but also plastic management and plastic waste management. The reason for this is that if we continue to produce the plastics in one country, but other countries have banned, it does not limit the impacts that this plastic have, that this waste has on the different countries. These impacts are not aware of the different borders that we have, but they cross, they do go across the different borders and into different countries, where we have seen increase in issues of flooding and even pollution of lakes that are cross-country, that run across different countries, and even the impacts on wildlife and livestock. And finally, I would also say that one thing that really needs to be considered very seriously is the availability and access to alternatives. As we've said, plastic is important. The reason it has gained so much popularity over a very short period of time is because it solves a lot of problems. Unfortunately, it does create even bigger problems. But if we're looking at solving problems, how do we already start creating avenues to address those same problems? And one of the mechanisms is to ensure that we're considering what the alternatives are. Either these are being produced in the country, or we're able to access them from different other producers. For example, we've got access to different natural technologies or natural made technologies like baskets that would serve as alternatives. But the issue is opening up the markets to allow those alternatives to thrive on the market. Because if you look at the thing about plastic, the reason that has also very much advanced across the globe is because it is so cheap. It comes off as very cheap to produce. So if we're looking at advancing alternatives, how do we create the right environment once we've instituted a plastic ban to ensure that the alternatives can also thrive as much as plastic and that they're accessible to different consumers? Now, I know we'll get into a more in-depth discussion, but I see Anderson keeps on bringing on his videos. I think he's telling me that my time is just about up. And so we will discuss, I think, on how issues of awareness amongst the citizens, as well as how we can start considering cleaning up the mess. And this extends into the issue of the polluter pays principle. And I'm looking forward to having a discussion around that in the next few minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Gloria. That's very insightful. Well, if I had my way, you would keep going, but we'd have to cut you short. And I don't know for everybody, but the key things that stuck out to me were: one, do you have systems in place if you want to have a ban? The second is, do you have plans to enforce this and also to treat the plastic that you're going to seize or confiscate, however you want to describe it? The third is, you need to also consider the transboundary movement of plastic, even though you ban it in your country. And the last thing is the availability of alternatives. So these are but some of the factors that need consideration if a country wants to ban plastics. Thank you very much once again, Gloria. Next is Mr. Juvenal Mukurarinda to tell us or speak about how to make policies on plastic waste a reality. Mr. Mukurarinda, if you're ready, please take over.
Yeah, thank you very much, Anderson. Good afternoon once again, good morning, and good evening, wherever you are. So how do we make policies a reality? And thank you very much also, Gloria, to kind of have also introduced what is really needed in terms of setting up the systems in place and also introducing institutional arrangements. We also understand that such kinds of solutions, most of the time they have to be defined in the policies and the strategies. Kudos, first of all, for African countries. We understand that almost 34 countries have introduced the ban, policies on banning the plastic, on single-use plastics. They have actually passed or adopted, or sometimes have started the implementation of such kind of bans. But first of all, before I run into the reality of the plastic waste as a policy itself, I also want to emphasize on the fact that the challenges we are facing with plastic waste, again, I know Gideon introduced this. Again, Gloria also emphasized on this, that we don't have systems in place. But again, let's see it in a bit more on environmental issues. For example, we understand that the plastics are actually threatening the infiltration of soils. We also understand that they're also threatening the biodiversity for example, the water bodies like lakes, rivers, as well as sea. They are also clogging the drainage systems and triggers actually the floodings. We've also had an example in Ghana where some time back, at least 150 people well died from floodings caused by the cloggings of drainage caused by the plastics. We also know that in most areas where this are happening as a banning of plastic, it is also causing pollution. And then these are some of the challenges we are facing. And then again, all these results actually in weak household refuse collection systems. We also have an incompliant landfill, as also talked about, also Gloria touched on this one. So the systems, we lack of these systems. But again, also on the education side of it, we have poor levels of understanding how the dangers of actually the plastic waste on the environment as well as on public health. So conceiving such kinds of issues, yes, I understand that most of the African countries have passed the laws banning the plastic waste. But again, how do they tackle on the issue that is need to actually be emphasized from the central level up to the lower tier, I mean the local governments? How do they respond on the reuse? How do they respond on recycling? How do they respond on the recover when it comes to the plastic themselves? And how do they actually put up clear actions and roadmaps when it comes to plastic themselves, the management of it? So all these are the key elements that such kind of policies would kind of frame into, I would say, realistic time activities and also a roadmap that is really achievable. And such kind of policies, they should, of course, be disseminated from the central level up to lower tier community, exactly to understand and to voice up who the roles and the responsibilities of each stakeholders in the specifically for the plastic waste management. And then if then they are really well framed in that way, giving also roles and responsibilities for each stakeholder, then how do we make them a reality? Then these are the key areas that I actually want us to kind of understand. So the reality here means that the policies should actually give us a way how we improve the local government, either to household waste collection and also the firm decision regarding to the roles of household separation, also reclaimers. The policies need also to dramatically give an indication to educate community about the dangers of plastic waste in the environment and the role they can play in preventing it. The policy need to introduce systems and programs across African continent. Of course, this is something really that is also happening to some of the countries to clean up our water resources, our wetlands, our estuaries, and also prevent plastic pollution from entering the sea. The policies also should take a firm on decision to remove a range of single-use plastics, of course, and from our production and consumption processes with clear incremental targets on the annual basis. We also need to do more, create a sustainable market for recyclables or recycled plastics. And also we must intensify our efforts to kind of guide the product design to facilitate the circular economy. And lastly, we must do our research and also environmental impacts for a viable and energy reclaiming from plastic waste of unsuited plastic for recycling. This is what we kind of need to do to ensure that plastic falls under the reality of our day-to-day lives. Over to you, Anderson. And I actually look forward for further discussions on the next steps. Thank you.
Very great points there, Juvenile. Thank you very much. By way of summary of what he said, one, framing the policies really well. Two, assigning clear roles and responsibilities to people would help in the process. Also, connecting the benefits of the policy to the region or district and also the household levels. Education, 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 a key aspect of it. And then also instituting programs across the country to help make the policies a reality. And also in the market economy, we look at the market plastic chain, and then you provide markets for the plastics that you decide to deal with, or either ban or manage it. Thank you very much once again, Juvenile. And the third person to speak is Ms. Bezawit Ishetu, and she will be talking about implementing plastic circular economy at the community level. Ms. Ishetu, you have the floor.
Thank you, Anderson. Let me share my screen. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Sure. Okay, thank you. So my topic was more to bring it into the human sphere, basically demystifying what circular economy is and making it more on what on day-to-day activities should look like when we try to embrace circularity. As I was introduced at the beginning, I am Beza and I work for the African Circular Economy Network. So our network is actually working on 3 levels of engaging with the stakeholders out there. One is on the must pillar, which is the policy level. And then on the second level, we work with the private sectors to make sure that the pool is coming from the obvious, feasible, attractive, low-hanging fruit, economic value of whatever circularity can bring to the table. And the third and most important one that we are also trying to address is the level of awareness and advocating it to the communities themselves. Because the pull and push can be on 2 ways. One, it can be from top to bottom, and then it can also be from bottom to up. People can be the ones dictating the market, the needs, the demands, and even the policy design. So we do it both from bottom to top and then from top to bottom. That's how we do with a lot of our initiatives and projects. Having said that, I would just like to address the common knowledge out there. Why plastic become so ubiquitous, like you find it wherever you turn. It's always there. It's practically used by everyone and almost for everything, either it is utensils or furnitures or day-to-day activities, shopping, everything. It's used by almost everyone, I would say. So instead of focusing on electronic waste, factories, chemical and waste management, I would like us this afternoon to focus on our household level as a case study to see how close plastics are to us in our daily day-to-day life. All our, yes?
Sorry, I don't mean to be rude. I think people want you to have your presentation a slide show mode so they could see it. So if you could please adjust it, that'll be great.
Okay. I was just trying to do that. It's just nope. Maybe my co-host can do that. Sorry for taking time.
No problem. David, are you able to assist? Please?
I have sent them the software. Yes, sorry. Sorry. Good, perfect. Yeah, so what I was trying to say is all the materials that we have been using in our day-to-day life since time memorial, it could be, sorry, back again, sorry. Our shopping bags, our water fetching materials, our drinking materials, our storage, our lunchbox, our food storage material, packaging. Like for example, this is a common material made from false banana leaves to wrap up our honey and what do you call it? Butter and other things. Household utensils like drinking materials, even our furnitures, mats. This is just to show you that this was what we were using before the era of iron, wood, and plastics come into picture. Even our jewelries, we were using beads, but now it is more of a plastic one. So how are these now replaced? By what are these materials replaced now? By a wide variety of plastic materials. The list is endless, but these are just some of the things that I could capture just to show you that whatever we were using on our day-to-day life from morning till night, it is now replaced practically by plastics on every step. Why is that so? Quite a number of reasons, but first and foremost, I would say it's a durable material. We have to appreciate the chemical and physical characteristics of plastics. It's a durable material, and it is more hygienic, and then cost-effective for transporting goods longer distances because it is a lightweight material. Instead of carrying it in a bulky packaging material, if you carry it in a much more thinner plastic material, it is much easier. And then also the other thing which we'll also have to appreciate is it's economically not very expensive. It is much compared to wood, metal, glass, and other new product materials in the manufacturing sector. It is relatively cheaper. So that's one of the things why everything ended up being, most of the thing ended up being plastic. It's also easily accessible and affordable. It's also considered as a modern way of manufacturing products, which is affordable, easily accessible, and much more less, I would say, from business point of view. And then globally, we should also take into consideration that the push comes from the multi-conglomerate oil and petroleum industries. This is something that we can't bypass because the push comes from that angle also. It's not always environment and sustainability also, because economy is the thing that's driving the global platform also. So why is the problem? Like, it is easily accessible, affordable, and all the other good qualities mentioned. Like as it mentioned by other presenters before me, once it is used and discarded in the dustbin, it ends up almost everywhere, on the streets, on the rivers, in the dustbin, in the landfills, and it stays longer than intended. No, in some cases even 500 years to decompose and become part of the nature and the ecosystem. So that creates a pollution, and the pollution directly also affects the ecosystem and our natural capital. And we can no longer afford to add more plastic waste into the system. So we need to find a way. In a very short, in a nutshell, the cost of inaction for not taking any tangible action for this solution, for this problem, is very high. So far, the banning of single-use plastics less than certain millimeters of thickness, single-use plastic, like one material which is not used more than once, it was also banned at one point in our policy life cycle in Ethiopia. And then enhancing recycling, the young entrepreneurs are still encouraged to collect the waste and then recycle it back into the system. And when they do that, they've got some kind of incentive. One way or another, it's about technical and business model incentives, but not much success. Why? Again, something that we can't go behind without addressing is that the production of plastic still exceeds the recycling quantity, quality, and capacity, not only in Africa, but globally. The other thing is, again, the push comes from the multi-million-dollar industries, which still want to make sure that the business component is more sound and more louder than the other impacts and opportunities. So whether we accept it or not, plastic will be around for the next 50 years or so, except that we will have to find out a solution for either banning it or reducing it or changing it with alternative materials to reduce the impact, the negative impacts. But the topic of my discussion today is why the communities can't really change. It's because in general, not all, but in mostly, there's lack of alternative material solutions with similar benefits. And there is lack of solid waste management capacity. By capacity, I mean, if we end up having a waste on the street, which is not collected for quite a long time, the chances are people will end up dumping it in the rivers for quite a number of reasons. And cleaning the rivers is another headache, so still end up with disrupting the ecosystem. The lack of alternative material solutions, if we're not going to use plastics, what? How are we going to make money? Because it's the number of small cottage industries producing plastics, like a single-use plastics at the backyard of their households, is quite a solid number, I would say. So if those people are supposed to be stopping their business, what other alternative livelihood are we creating for them? What other alternative material are we suggesting for them to use? There wasn't, unfortunately, for a good majority of our history since we banned single-use plastic bags, so we still have them around. There are other problems, but these were the main ones. So this is my last slide. So this is where circularity can come into picture. Globally, what is driving the market these days is the environmentally conscious consumer behavioral change and needs. People are now changing or considering to pay extra money or extra efforts to use environmentally friendly, eco-friendly products and services. They would go to consider paying more for not only the economic benefits, but also for the environmental and societal opportunities that they could implement or explore and implore. So if we design markets with this in line with this paradigm shift, there's a very good chance that people would be driving the market, the consumers would be driving the production sector, the manufacturing sector in that direction. If there is a demand for bioplastics or packaging which is made of circular concepts and principles, then there will be production. So in my view, the direction of pull will come from the other side of the consumer side. The second and most important one is for innovations. This is where the capacity of the universities, the young entrepreneurs, and all the research and development come into picture to come up with alternative materials and products. It could be a very simple solution like using the avocado stones to mash them, come up with the correct adhesives to make cutleries, which are going to end up being degraded way earlier than what a plastic cutlery would do. So that's where we need to focus on how these innovative inspirations, aspirations, or even a simple love can actually be in place to fast track this change. What has been working so far is using, sorry, it's a spelling mistake here, existing successful brands to promote circular alternative products and services. For example, when Nestle introduced the use of sustainable plastic packaging material, the story or the knowledge or the information was cascaded until the household level. Whereas if it's an individual or if we're trying to introduce a new brand, it's much easier to convince the market and branding systems out there. But if one organization with much more interesting, already existing established brand endorse and try to mainstream circular ideas and concepts, it would be much more successful. When Nike, the shoe company, introduced a green leather which is chrome-free, obviously not many chemical and other pollutants, the story was always on the social media and on all the advertisements out there, and it was okay. It is I'm not saying that the others won't make it, but it is much easier for the ones with high brand or already known brands would plug this topic. Finance is always a problem, but there are ways of finding innovative incentives for prototyping, branding, and production of circular products and services. It could either be in the form of incubation hubs or startup seed funds, anything, but whatever financial schemes which are really important to drive other sectors can also apply for this one also. So in my view, once the level of a certain level of awareness and capacity and alternative opportunities and economical feasibilities are there, it is much easier to impose regulations and legislation for maximizing impact. Otherwise, people will start questioning, yes, the ban is there, but how am I going to actually make sure that I follow the ban without making it a very difficult task for me, for the manufacturers, for the consumers at all levels of stakeholders, I would say. So with that, I would stop my presentation here, and I'm around for discussions. Thank you. Stop sharing. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Shetu. That was very informative. And I took some notes. Well, people, I'm taking my notes here. I have about 2 pages. I hope you are taking notes as well. By way of summary, what she talked about is having the alternatives to plastics in place. Also looking at solid waste management capacity in communities, as well as looking at economic feasibility in a community. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts on this topic. All right, so what we have next would be the video screening that will give some context regarding plastics. However, the chat has been very, very interactive. And I want to read a couple of comments that and ideas that have been shared here. So we have Charles indicating that to be able to ban plastics, there should be a proper strategy in place for recycling, reuse, plastic population awareness, and other possible alternatives to replace single-use plastics. If that is not done, then there's going to be a real challenge in trying to implement the bans. Thank you very much for your thoughts, Charles. There is another thought here. So Joshua says that he's using Ghana as an example where the necessary policies and measures that are needed to ban plastics will be proposed, but politics plays a central role in not making that happen. So that is his observation regarding the challenges to developing and implementing plastic waste bans. Okay, and Tadeo puts in a couple of papers here. I believe these are recent papers from Ethiopia regarding plastic waste management. Please let's keep the ideas and thoughts coming in the chat. It's very interactive. Share your opinions, share your thoughts there as well. So we'll move to our video screening. And David, if you're ready, if you could share that for us, that would be great.
You've probably heard about a giant trash island in the ocean. Or that poor sea turtle and the straw. Maybe you've even heard how plastic is being found inside the fish we eat. The plastic crisis gets a lot of attention, but the headlines usually focus on the plastic that ends up in the environment. And that's just part of the story. The truth is, plastic has a whole life cycle that's hidden from view, one that harms people and the planet from start to finish. Let's start at the beginning. Plastic is made from fossil fuels like oil or fracked natural gas. Extracting those fossil fuels and turning them into plastics creates a lot of pollution. Pollution that most often affects marginalized communities nearby. As we've gotten better about using less oil and gas to power our lives, the fossil fuel industry found a lifeline in plastics. In fact, oil and gas companies are doubling down on plastic production, with plans to build or expand over 300 petrochemical plants in the US alone by 2025. But these companies already produce more plastic than we can use. So where's all that plastic going? A lot of it's flowing into new markets, in places like Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Because more than any other product category, plastic isn't driven by the demand for it, but by the supply. Corporations like Unilever, Nestle, and Procter & Gamble are aggressively marketing single-use plastic products around the world. These companies go to places like Indonesia, where I live, and push their products onto communities that just aren't prepared to deal with all that plastic. Maybe they're used to using natural packaging. Maybe they live on a tiny island without a system of waste collection. And on top of that, countries in the global north are shipping their own plastic waste into these countries too. When you add that all up, it's no wonder so much of this plastic ends up in the environment. And globally, that's where a whopping 32% of plastic packaging ends up. 40% goes to a landfill, where plastic just piles up for future generations to deal with. And 14% is incinerated. Incineration is a nasty business, producing toxic smoke and fly ash. These super expensive facilities depend on plastic to burn everything else. It is oil and gas after all. So they want to see more plastic, not less. Yahoo! Then there's recycling. Unfortunately, it's not the solution that many people think it is. Just 14% of plastic packaging gets recycled, and only 2% is effectively recycled, meaning it becomes something as useful as before. The rest is downcycled into something worse. And most recycled plastic is only recycled once, before ending up in landfills, incinerators, or the environment anyway. So it turns out that we can't burn, bury, or recycle our way out of this problem. And we can't just scoop all that plastic out of the environment either. That's like trying to bail out a bathtub with a teaspoon while the tap is on full blast. So how about we turn off the tap by shutting down the plastic machine? That means passing policies that create systemic change. Like phasing out the single-use plastics that pollute the most, ending the fossil fuel subsidies that are fueling big plastic, and holding companies responsible for the plastic waste they create. That's how we can achieve our vision of a zero-waste future, where all of our products and packaging can be reused or repaired, effectively recycled or composted, and ultimately how we create a sustainable, circular economy that works for both people and the planet. Visit storyofplastic.org to learn more and take action. You've probably
Thank you very much, David, for sharing that. It's getting interactive in the chat. Please do share your thoughts. There is a question here that I would like people to share their opinions on. So Godfred is asking, how can we overcome the barriers of political influences in order to ban plastics? Please, let's hear thoughts in the chats. I know the panelists would also be touching on that a little bit. Let's hear from you in the chat. What do you think? How can we overcome political influences in our various African countries to help us institute the bans on plastic? Let's hear from you. Okay, so now we want to do a little poll. We want to hear from you where you're joining us from and what's happening in terms of plastic waste bans in your country. David, are you able to launch the poll for us? Okay. We're using about 2-3 minutes to get this done. So please do participate for us. It will be great to have a sense of where you're joining us from. Okay, more people, more people.
Hello.
Okay. David, I believe we can move to the next question. So we are asking the policy availability. At what stage is your country in? Has your country developed and enforcing plastic waste ban, single-use plastic waste ban or policies? Is it being developed now? If you don't have any idea about that, that's also fine. We will be wrapping up in the next couple of seconds. So if you haven't participated yet, please do. Okay, David, I think it's we're good to go. All right, thank you to everyone for participating in the polls. Thanks, David, for launching the poll for us. So yeah, I've seen a couple of questions here in the chat, and I will be asking them. I'll be asking our panelists to share their thoughts and opinions on that. We're moving straight into the panel discussion. I hope people are finding this informative, educative, and also insightful. I mean, educative and insightful as well. We are moving to the panel discussion where there will be questions that we asked our panelists to share their thoughts on. And I'll be reading some of your questions in the chat. I hope actually to read every question that you put in the chat. So please do so, and let's have your questions. So our panelists, if they are ready, that'll be great. I'm sure people would like to see you. All right. Okay, Gloria is there, that's great. Juvenile is there, okay. Bezawet, are you still around or we lost you? Okay, there she is. Yeah, Bezawet, if you can have your camera on, that would be greatly appreciated. Okay, so there's some questions we have, and we know you are the experts here today. We want to hear what you have to say. The first question here is how to adapt plastic waste bans on the continent. So essentially what we're asking is, how are countries sharing their knowledge with others? Countries, about the 34 countries that have some sort of bans in place, how are they sharing their knowledge with countries that want to do same? What are the lessons learned and how is that being shared? We want to hear your thoughts on that since you work within those areas. Juvenile, take it away. Start with us. Let's hear what you have to say.
Yeah, David, Anderson, thank you very much. Truly humbled again to contribute on this topic. So I'll speak on the experience of Rwanda, where this has been implemented, and also we are seeing the results from it. So yeah, the case study, or what I can say as Rwandan, the government of Rwanda actually started with the assessment to check on the issues around plastic waste. And then, as I also mentioned, we know that various challenges are also associated with the pollution of plastic waste. So for Rwanda, the idea was to kind of check what is really an issue around the cleanliness, the health of human, the air quality, the drainage systems issues, agricultural productivity issues caused by the plastic pollution, and then the water quality issues associated with plastics, as well as the safety for the packaged food. From there on, the government itself kind of come up with one of the issue. And to start with the banning, of course, you can't start with all the types of plastics. Of course, you have to go gradually, given the fact that, as also mentioned by Beza, that plastics are lightweight, and also there are really economic instruments associated with it. but again, we also know the challenges. So you have to kind of weigh and then see where to start from. So as a government, in 2004, started with the banning of the carry bags, those which have with 60 millimeter of thickness. So, and then from there, we started to kind of ban the shopping bags, the carry bags, and then started with paper bags. And this actually, to do so, we've kind of done a state-wise mapping of producers to kind of check those who really produce the carry bags, and then start making actually stringent measures within the particular ban. And of course, we also had to kind of think of the alternatives, and then alternatives, of course, were the bags from bamboo and also the papers. We also know the issues around paper themselves production. But again, studies have shown out that the issues of paper versus plastics for paper is really lightweight, considered that they would actually be implementing like afforestation and so forth to kind of increase the production of forests, of course. And with that, we kind of seen the results from it. And in 2008, the parliament actually also had to kind of increase, the action towards the plastic bags. And in actually 2008, the parliament passed a ban on the prohibition of manufacturing, imports, and use and sales of polyethylene bags in Rwanda. And with that, again in 2019, also increased the ban by also introducing the what we call it was actually extended in 2019 to single-use plastics, and then it prohibits actually the manufacturing, importation, use, and sales of single-use plastics such as straws, bottles, and also food containers. And this particular ban actually also introduced stringent measures to enforce this particular ban, where, for example, in Rwanda, if a factory is actually found out that is also, let's say, selling plastic bags, it is actually fined between 100,000 Rwandan francs to 500,000 Rwandan francs, or they are really also, to sometimes also to some extent, being also facing jail between 6 to 12 months. So just to show how,
Sorry, Jonah, sorry to cut in there, but I just wonder, with these successes that you had, has there been maybe other countries coming to Rwanda and trying to learn from you it doesn't have to be the same because country contexts are very different, right? Do you have countries coming to you to learn some of these factors that have been enablers of the successes that you've had?
Of course, yeah, we've actually seen a lot of countries coming in Rwanda, because this is actually been written everywhere. I mean, the bloggers also in the journals, how Rwanda is actually being success when it comes to ban of these particular plastics. And for example, I've seen delegation from Burkina Faso, Senegal, Ethiopia, and to some extent, even Ghanaians have come to Rwanda to some extent to learn what is really happening in the country. So for a ban to be effective, of course, the policies are there, but again, they have to be accompanied by strict enforcement, and also, of course, the implementation part of it.
Thank you very much. Gloria, you want to chime in here?
I was going to say that I'm packing my bags and I'm moving to Rwanda because it's working there. So to be honest, I think there's a very important question that has been asked in the chats as well relating to this. And there's just the understanding that it's not easy even for just the bans to work, right? I just want to share a little bit on the actual experience for Malawi. we had the ban brought in 2015, and since then we've been in a legal battle with the plastic manufacturing companies. And this is despite the fact that prior to the enforcement of the ban, the government had given like sort of a grace period for companies to transition by advising them that by this period of time, we're going to start enforcing a ban, so you can no longer produce this type of plastics, this thickness of plastic. You have to now start transitioning your machinery to be able to produce the plastics that we're trying to at least promote, because they can't be recycled. And in spite of that, they were given about 2 years, if I'm not mistaken. And once the ban was put in place, companies straight up formed an association and they took government to court. And you know, it's been cat and mouse ever since. But one thing in the middle of this is that in as much as the government still instituted the ban, but there's also been a bit of wavering political will. So there was also a time when a minister of environment actually said in the newspaper, and he said, you know, companies can continue to produce plastics. This ban is no longer in force. And so you companies can do as you will, because there's also a lot of politics at play, because there were rumors of financing, political financing and partnerships within those circles. So it's such a complex process, because to be honest, the plastic problem is not a demand issue, it's a supply issue. So someone is telling you that you need this much plastic and you keep getting it, you know, and you don't really have a choice, because all the alternatives have been chopped out. They're either too expensive for you to afford, or at least this is the cheapest alternative for you, and you have pretty much no choice. And sometimes you don't even have access to the alternatives. So, I mean, to be honest, in terms of adapting, I think for me, the starting point is people. Because if people understand the importance of this ban, they will be the ones that will actually push for its enforcement. The plastic ban in Malawi calls for a ban on production, distribution, and use of single-use plastics. So this end part, the use here, that's where we have the power as people, and that's where as civil society we come in terms of educating people and mobilizing them to demand that this ban should work. Because companies only serve, you know, where they're welcomed. But if we make it clear that this is a product that we don't want in our communities, it's something that, you know, won't come to our communities anymore, and the impacts are quite dire. And if we start showing people that, listen, this is how much this plastic is affecting you, because sometimes once you discard it, it almost seems abstract to you as a person. But if people can start understanding that when we talk about how currently in the world, if there's worth 1 billion ton of plastic for each person, that's an incredibly large amount. And you think about it, that you may not see it now, but it's somewhere behind you. If we stack it up behind you, you would get lost in it. And that's how we get to mobilize people and start making these bans work. But I think depending on government is a long shot. We need people. We need people on the ground.
Yeah, and thank you for that. I think using those depictions make a lot of changes, because if you tell somebody 10,000 metric tons, I mean, what are you talking about, right? But if you can show that pictorially with some photos or whatever it is, that maybe it's just one big truck or 100 trucks of plastics filling your home, they probably will be like, what do you mean? So I'm going to be consumed in this, right? So, I mean, some of these would be helpful if, as advocates, as people who have more knowledge about it, if we're interacting with communities, using some of these would be very helpful. Yeah, thank you for that. And I'll be coming to the political question, because it's one that people want to have a response to. But Bezawet, what are your thoughts on that? How can we adapt the plastics waste ban effectively in countries?
I think Gloria really amalgamated the whole point very clearly. But just to give an example.
So Gloria is basically, she's taking my job, eh?
Yes, kind of. Yes. And then also I would like also to share a very interesting exercise that once we did in a factory setup, to show people how much waste they're actually producing and plastic they are also producing. We asked them to collect whatever waste, plastic waste they're producing every day, from shopping bags, from packaging, from even like women menstrual hygiene materials and kids' toys, a lot of things. So we told them compile that as a 1-month exercise to see how much waste, zero waste can you exercise. And then a lot of people came back saying, because it was an environmental management system for a factory, that we are trying to tell them that, you know, it starts from you making sure that everything is zero waste. So everyone, almost everyone came and said, oh, I stopped the exercise in the middle. So we told them, we asked them why. He said, no, in the middle, I realized what lesson you were telling me, because the house ended up being filled with a lot of waste that I didn't think I was producing. So yeah, we didn't push them because they already got the lesson in the midway. So it always comes, it's much better when it comes from the consumer side. It's just to share that experience. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Beza. Okay, so I'm jumping straight to Gloria again. Gloria, the political angle, you mentioned it, the influences that do come in your advocacy, or in quote, in your fight to make sure that the ban in Malawi was being implemented. How did you go around that? How did you go around dealing with the political, in quote, monster that was influencing what you were trying to do?
Yeah, so I think one of the most effective tools was the use of the media. And it still comes down to the fact that you need to let people know what's going on. We work with policymakers, with decision makers a lot, and we understand that some of our work is very technical, and sometimes in policy advocacy, you don't always have, you know, that public interest because it seems far too technical. But this is an issue that I think really hits home for a lot of people, and it's very easy to demonstrate just the importance of each person, whether you are you don't even have to be an environmentalist to appreciate this. And what we did is we really came together and we documented different stories and experiences. One story that has gone out quite a lot is my first encounter with plastic itself, where I was working on a completely unrelated project. It was not waste management related, it was in agriculture. And we found that we were having a problem with some of the goats that we were giving out to farmers, because some of them would lose them. And it wasn't just the farmers in our project, it was the farmers around the community. A lot of them were losing some of their goats to plastic ingestion. And you know, this is an impact that you're facing in a project that is not waste related, but you can really just appreciate how far stretched the impacts of plastic are on people's lives. And for an economy that is based entirely on agriculture, or 80% on agriculture, this is something that you would really be able to leverage to get people to understand and to get the sympathy that would give you the public support to push against the political powers. Because at the end of the day, politics is about maintaining popularity. And it seems that, you know, once politicians see that they're losing popularity, if they're supporting something that's not popular with the communities, it becomes something that, you know, they become interested in. And so that's what we did. We showcased it through the media. We had a very strong tie with the media, where we documented the stories. We even conducted these marches, and these marches, they brought a lot of attention to this issue. And, you know, I think in as much as we say that the plastic ban is not something that people push for or that they understand, but people, I think they see the importance of it, but like I said, because they don't have the alternatives, they don't know what else to push for. So another part has been to really advocate for the opening up of opportunities. So the issues of taxes, how do we start removing taxes from alternatives. So if you're going to start producing paper packaging, how do we start reducing taxes on that? Or if we're importing better alternatives, how do we remove the taxes and then make these more accessible? And this involved quite a lot of engagement, direct engagement with policymakers. We're still engaging because the case is still in court, and we actually on Thursday were in court because another company has issued another stay order in the enforcement. But I think it's just been really interesting to see it unfold, and to realize that there's just so much push from the companies. And Juvenal has talked about this, and Seshedo has talked about it, how companies have so much power. But really, if you have people on your side, I think it makes such a big difference.
Yeah. So what I'm getting is that it's not just about advocating. You also have to be packed in terms of legal people, just in case that it turns that way, right? And also having to, in quote, fight political support at the local levels too, because I'm sure some communities that you will be in, people will be like, well, the government is doing nothing wrong, right? So to be able to turn people and make them understand the real effect and impact will also be very important in that sense. Thank you very much. Yeah. Juvenal, you seem to have had a good system. How did politics not play a role in there? Did it? And how did you overcome it? Any thoughts?
Thank you, Anderson. So the good thing about one, at least the government, there is a political willingness for this sector, and different with some of the countries, of course. But we also know that one of the challenges, the salient challenges, is the strength of those companies, industries that produce plastics, who sometimes go behind and tell people not to let's say respect what is really being encouraged from the government side. But thank God this is not happening in Rwanda. Rwanda is yes, service based, I would say oriented government, where we prioritize actually the tourism. And then actually we know, as you prioritize tourism, you also have to focus on areas of banning this kind of plastics. So there is an understanding, I would say, from the central level to the local government level, where system is really well structured, and the flow of communication from the central level to the lower tier government I would say structure is really well set up. And with this, actually, we are seeing, a good flow of information from the top to bottom. And this actually has helped a lot with regards to this particular ban of plastics, how the message is actually informed, or the channel of information is really, I would say, really good. And I also want to reiterate on the fact that Gloria mentioned it, the influence of media, and then how can we use media to kind of showcase the real problem, and then how these civil organizations or civil society organizations or other stakeholders in the sector are really channeling or documenting these particular issues around plastic waste management. And such things actually, and with the government that is really willing to kind of have a difference on what is happening, I think is really very, I would say, easy to kind of find solutions together. And one element that I actually want to kind of emphasize on is that waste management is not a private service thing. It's actually a public service. And the government should understand that this thing, there is no business in it if you are not taking a step ahead as a government and also try to see what could be the alternative measures for us to kind of protect both the environment as well as the public health.
Yeah.
And yes, for those countries that there is an issue of political issues, I would tell them that please make aware of the impact, negative impact, and also if you kind of adopt the alternative, there is a positive, I would say, you save life. Again, there is an economic incentive in that one. Over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm just gathering from you, Juvenile, that political will and political framing of the issue is critical, because as it's connected, for example, in your case with tourism, the government wants to rake in income. That's an economic aspect of it, right? So then they need to do all that is possible to ensure that we don't have the country being littered or illegal dumping going on, and therefore the country is, in quote, clean, that people could come visit, right? So the framing and the political will to do that is very critical there. Thank you very much for that. Yeah. Bezawet, any thoughts on that?
No, it's okay. I'll pass this time. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So the next question, and there's a lot of questions in the chat that I'll be asking you. The next question I have here before I move to the questions in the chat, it's the alternatives. I mean, all of you have talked about alternatives. What are the alternative strategies in the first place that could be used that would help in managing plastics effectively, right? So, Bezawet, do you want to start with us on this one?
Yes. I mean, the first and most important alternative is definitely the finding a product or a material, a raw material, which could, if not better, at least be equally valuable as plastics. It might not be an easy challenge. It might require a lot of research and prototyping and product assessment, but it's worth the try, I would say. So first is finding the raw material. The raw material can come in the form of nature-based solutions, like instead of using plastics, how about using jute materials, or other kinds of starch materials like agro waste that could be converted into paper materials, for example, and then made out of all fibers can actually be converted into plastic, into a polymer that could be plastic kind of physical characteristics. So encouraging those kind of agro wastes to be in place. The options are quite numerous. It could also be using the leaves or the covers of, for example, a mango leaf. I once stumbled upon an innovative solution where they used a mango leaf to make a leather, like a fabric. So those kind of innovations are where you could find the explore a good majority of alternative materials. The other one is to push for incentives. Incentives, I mean, somebody should obviously de-risk the cost of taking the risk of exploring new products. And obviously the donors in the private sector want to do that. The private sector want to do that because it is not cost effective. What if it doesn't work out? So they don't want to take the risk. But development partners can come here. For example, an interesting project by DFID was they were de-risking the cost of initial investments for green leather products. So the objective was for the manufacturers to get premium price incentives wherever they were exporting the product, instead of getting profit out of the whole process. So those kind of incentives should be in place because it would actually bring on board a lot of entrepreneurs to develop business models where they could thrive and then also give options for the community. Those are my 2 comments that I would really think could open up the space for innovation and alternatives. Thank you.
Yeah, great comments. And I mean, the fundamental thing I'm getting from you is research and innovation, which means that there needs to be a lot of investments made in trying to uncover alternatives that best suits a country that could replace the various forms of plastics that do exist. Good. Thank you. Juvenile, come to you once again. Alternatives, and also alternative strategies in general that could be utilized.
Yeah, apart from the research and also innovations, and then also introduction of incentives, we also need, as government, sometimes we also need to kind of accompany the policies that we have with additional regulations. For example, we need to kind of introduce post-consumer, like extended producer responsibilities. And by introducing such kind of regulations, we are going to have a kind of space for those innovators and also incentives that will be well defined in such kind of regulations. And then again, by having such kind of regulations in place, we need also to make sure that they really they are really disseminated up to the lower tier to kind of give any information to the communities around there that if you do this, there is a price for that one. And there is also an award for you, for example. Like, so these are some of the incentives that has to be defined in those kinds of regulations. And other than that, actually, continuously awareness and also massive campaigns around that always produce an opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you too. Gloria.
I think almost everything has been mentioned, but I just wanted to add on the involvement of people. One strategy that was brought in, introduced in Malawi, and I think Rwanda has done this very, very well, is, for example, the cleanup initiatives. I think that they've been a very good tool for raising awareness, but also getting people involved. One of the problems I have with plastic is the fact that even if you ban the production now, the fact is that we still have these tons and tons and tons of plastic that is already out in the environment. And so how do we reverse this situation? And one way is to get people involved, because in all honesty, it's very expensive for government to do these cleanups on their own, but also manage the entire system. So if you look at the opportunity that such initiatives create for raising awareness, but also just demonstrating to people the actual and true cost of plastic, I think it makes such a difference, even in terms of supporting enforcement. But also, I think it's really important to look at the entire value chain, the waste value chain. There's a lot of opportunities with waste reclaimers and, you know, the informal waste sector. And those opportunities do include issues of capacity building. You would find that, you know, some of them are able to access different types of plastic, but because they don't have the capacity to upcycle it, you know, they're missing out on opportunities to add value to the plastic. And so I think there's a lot of room for partnerships, as Beza had said already, for projects that would actually focus on exploring how we can actually build people's livelihoods from the waste that we've created. So basically turning waste to wealth, as has been commonly termed in different circles. But I also think that it's important to really look at the true cost of plastic and to actually introduce policies that ensure that plastics on the market are actually being costed at their real value or their real price. So for example, currently, if you're saying, let's say you're buying a plastic bag for $1, but its true value is not that $1 to me, because what will happen is after I'm done with it, it goes back into the environment and it's going to cost the government $5 to clean up, because then they have to have a vehicle that's going to pick up that waste, or they have to have a plant that recycles that waste. So the actual cost of that plastic is $6. So what we're saying is, start actually selling that plastic at $6 so that we're able to recover the true cost of the plastic and we're able to manage the waste. If you insist on producing plastic, then you truly must pay the true cost of the plastic on the environment and on people. But it's not fair to transfer that cost to taxpayers. And I think that's something that needs to come out very strongly.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. And that's why I've had a lot of challenges with EPR policies everywhere I've been in trying to understand what it is, right? In my academic work, these are some of the things that I look at. And the EPR policies seem to be taxpayers paying for everything. I mean, except for places like, say, Germany and other, like Netherlands and a few places where they've really got it going and it's really impacting attitudes. In a lot of places, right, in North America, where I am, for example, the consumers would have to pay back. So the question is, what's really happening? The essence of EPR policies was not just to take it out of the system, it's to help design new ways of having materials so that we don't have waste in the system in the first place, right? But we seem to forget that angle, and we focus too much on the lower stream, where it is getting the plastics from consumers or in the environment and trying to recycle or do whatever we want to do with them. But the upcycling aspect, where we have to look at, no, let's design. If you look at the how do I call it, zero waste hierarchy, you get some of these things: redesign, rethink, and all of that. Are we focusing on that top part of that triangle, or we're just focusing on the lower parts of it? So I've always had some of these challenges when I review EPR policies or when I read about them. And I like your point on the public-private partnership. And it's the same thing that Olotokunbo is saying here, that yes, everybody has a part to play, and then it has to work through a PPP, that is public-private partnerships in countries, to ensure that it's successful. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts. I'll go on to ask a couple of questions from the chat. So Adebisi wants to find out, is there any data to support the effectiveness of single-use plastics? And is plastic bans, or are plastic bans enough? Gloria, since you're on, I'm going to ask you, are they enough? Is there data to support that plastic bans are really working?
There's not enough data, and the little data that is there, I think it's quite varied from in different contexts. But from my experience in Malawi, I would say that it's not working. And the reason that we also discussed the importance of having to consider specific factors prior to the ban is because what the experience is showing is that in the absence of those additional factors that you either consider prior to or during the enforcement of the ban, they simply are not enough. And so, because I mean, even the bans themselves, they're not all encompassing, at least not in most countries. So you still have quite a bit of plastic that's still being pushed into the environment. So I think there's more that needs to be done. The bans are, a quick fix. It's almost like a Band-Aid, like quickly stop the tap, but there's so much more that needs to be done because that pressure is still building up and we sort of need to find a way to navigate it. And one of the ways is some of the things that we've just discussed. I think Juvenal and Beza have talked quite a lot on the circular economy concept, looking at alternatives that are available within the country, and also just looking at other policies, not just the bans themselves, but looking at the issues of the levies, the taxes, the polluter pays, enforcing polluter pays principle, finding a way that works for you within your context, but also just getting people more involved, because ultimately it will all end at the consumer being able to also make a different choice and being able to demand better from companies, from governments. And that's where we are now. I think that's probably the biggest task we have ahead of us as a continent and as a global community, basically.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. And I would read what Perk put here. I think it aligns with what you're saying. Our consumerist nature as users of plastic products and the capitalist nature of producers and corporations need to be considered. Less consumption of plastics will drive producer to limit production, which I call consumer power. Thank you for that, Perk. Okay, so I'll come to you, Beza. What are your thoughts on that? Is there enough data on the effectiveness of plastic bans, or single-use plastic bans, to be more precise?
I actually am not quite aware of figures, like figurative data, but I think some African countries, like 10 or 11 of them, have already endorsed it. But the country who is actually really flagging it and taking action is Kenya. No, you can't actually take plastic bags into the country, especially through the airport. So obviously they can have concrete data saying that we have managed to reduce this much amount of plastic from coming to the country. But that's only through the airport. No, the other routes taking you to the country are still open, so you can't tell for real. Well, as I told you, unfortunately for Ethiopia, we started it, but the complaint from the cottage industries and plastic companies was high, so we had to kind of tone it down and stop, basically. But the call is out there. Even the African ministerial, the first wives of the African ministers and heads of states did come up with a kind of a solution for that, saying we should come up with a common solution. They have a team every year. The year before it was HIV, and then after that it was maternal health and protection. But last year it was on banning plastics as a collective action from the 54 African nations. But that also didn't materialize much. So, but there are initiatives like that taking place on both higher level and lower level. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Juvenile, it's all working for you guys. What is your data? You want to share with us?
Exactly. Exactly, Anderson. But let me also emphasize on the fact that how do we frame our policies on plastic bans? Sometimes you also have to kind of put in the exceptions. Of course, you can put up a policy that bans all single-use plastics, but again, it's given the fact that alternatives are really limited, you also need to see that particular factor. But again, for Rwanda case where we've actually introduced this ban, the data are there. And the government with, I would say, the strict implementation, also enforcement, we've actually been able to control our borders. We've been able to control even our airports. And then with this, we actually had the opportunity to kind of minimize the entrance of these particular parts of plastics in the country. And with that, actually, we are seeing results, of course. And but sometimes one of the issues around that, we've actually had the challenge of the black market of these particular plastic bags. But again, these with the enforcement, also the punishment that lies from that, people have started now to understand that, yes, the government there for us to see what is the really the challenges around plastic, the use of plastic waste, but also as community, what do we really get as a result from that particular action, government action. So a quite of experience is that since the ban of the plastic, now communities have realized that there is an importance in that one. And I like the fact that Gloria mentioned that Rwanda is also an example when it comes to cleanliness. Yes, Rwanda has been criticized of, putting up these stringent, I would say, measures to plastic waste. But again, we are seeing results from that. So it is actually declared as one of the cleanest, I would say, countries in Africa or worldwide, if I'm not mistaken. So given that positive impact around that, it has also been given a push to kind of even move towards, banning additional single-use plastics. And now we also have to understand that, yes, give ourselves a grace period when we will be ready. And then by that time, within that grace period, how do we communicate with the community? How do we make the producers ready to kind of know that, let's say within 5 years, this particular type of plastic is no longer going to be used in Rwanda? So these are some of the areas that Rwanda has been using all over to kind of success with this one. But again, we also need to emphasize on the fact that the government should also put up, I would say, tools that would also encourage the local innovators to kind of, who are actually transitioning from those particular plastic by using the environmental friendly products. So yeah, the government have now trying to kind of, incentivize those local companies. But again, still, communication is also important. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Well, I guess we would have to start to initiate research on this very important question. So I'm going to give the floor to about 2 people who have indicated they have a few things to share. And I'll start with Tadeo. I hope I had your name right, or I mentioned it right. If you can unmute yourself and then make a contribution, that'll be great.
Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Doing well. Thanks for joining.
Oh, I am happy. Yeah, thank you for inviting me this interesting panel discussion. My name is Tadela Safa from Ethiopia. I think one of Ethiopian panelists is that I have listened in Beza with. And all you, the panelists are present, which is very interesting issues in the current world, highly emerging pollutants, we can say that plastic pollution. But I want to say one thing, a number of things are already said, and I want to emphasize on one, which is very important as per my understanding, which is the social media. Before talking about that, I can give you one example which have happened in my laboratory. By the way, I'm environmental engineering specialist. Now I'm doing my PhD on that area also. So my master's students are doing on microplastic in Bahar Dar University from the big lakes, that is Lake Tana, including the fish one as a sample, and some community around the lab sees that a number of microplastic particles are inside in the fish, and they are already emotional how it could be, and just we are dying, they say all the things, and they're shaking such amount of particles are there in the biota. Ultimately we can eat it, and which is have enormous impact on the human health. After a day, I see that that person collecting a number of plastics around there in the land-based and dumping into the bin. You see, so I understand that from this, awareness is very important.
Yes.
Nobody is known that this much of impact or effect have these plastics as well. It is fragmented microplastic too. So the big issue, as like that of other social medias we are talking about in all the countries in our broadcasting, talking about plastic pollution, which is the big issue, and also really impacted on the human health. Everybody can collect the waste and can practice the management also. So I believe this one, and I see this kind of example from around in my laboratory. One of my MSc students is doing on microplastic, that including the sample from fish.
Yeah, I think Tadeo,
the freshwater system. So yes, you can say.
Yeah, no, you were breaking out a little bit, but I mean, we get your point. So you're talking about the power of social media and how that could lead to individual behavioral changes around plastic management. Thank you very much. That's very good. And that's very
that is the main thing.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
And the other issue is...
Oh, sorry to cut you there. Sorry. I want to give the time also to Davidson, if that's okay with you, for him to also share his thoughts. But thank you very much, Tadeo. Davidson, if you could please unmute. Hi, Davidson. Yes. Yeah, Davidson, there is a lot of noise in your background. If you could please get to a place where there isn't much noise, that'll be great, because it's hard to really hear you.
Yeah, I'm here now. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. It's much better.
Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to us all. Hello, can you hear me?
Your voice is very faint. If you could please increase your maybe the volume on your device. Something.
Can you hear me now?
Much better, yes.
All right. Good morning, good afternoon.
Oh, no. David, so you're muted. Can you please unmute yourself? Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Oz. My name is Davidson Malison from Nigeria.
Okay.
I want to start by commending this this group and this forum for a job well done. I think what we're doing is actually timely, apt, considering the things happening around the world in terms of plastic waste management. I think is a step in the right direction. I must say kudos to those who are at the forefront of championing this cause. I think basically while the discussion was ongoing, I dropped some questions at the chat group, and then I will also want to add probably more like a question and an addendum to what has already been said. I know we talk about policies availability, we talk about raw material and some other stuffs like that. In Nigeria, basically, one of the challenges we're really encountering in terms of plastic waste management is that of political interference. You know, in a situation where you have people of different political views, different political angles, there are different political strata of life. Whenever a policy that is geared towards that direction, some people who are not really in the other party, you know, begin to devise out modalities to see that such a policy do not really see the end of the day or do not see the light of the day. And so politically, we've been affected in terms of waste management. And then I want to also talk about the last person who spoke actually touched a lot of things that I wanted to say. Social media. I think one of the
so
greatest...
Davidson, sorry,
Yeah.
Davidson. Well, can you please make it snappy because our time is really moving very fast. Yes.
Okay, okay. I think we need more advocacy. Probably the world has turned digital. I am talking about social media. I think we can do greater than what we're doing in terms of bringing more people on board to know what we're doing social media wise, so that people can really join this noble movement. I think that's what I want to add. Well done and well done once again. And I am so glad that I was invited to be a part of this team. I hope to unveil myself onto other things that will come forth. Thank you.
And thank you very much for sharing your thoughts there. That's great. And yeah, thank you for coming as well. All right, so to conclude the panel discussion, I'm going to be asking our panelists one final question. We've said a lot. You've shared a lot of ideas with us. What next? What do we need to do from here? Gloria, I'll pick on you. What do we do from here based on all that we've said, all that we've talked about today?
Thank you so much, Anderson. I think it's been really interesting hearing all the insights from not just the panelists, but even in the chat box. There's a lot of interesting ideas. And I think one thing that comes out strongly is the need to form this global community of learning, at least on a continental kind of level. We've talked about the different policies that are in place, but we certainly have also lamented on the lack of data and the experience sharing to say how do we make this work in our country, but also how do we galvanize as a community to push for these things. We've already talked about how this is a transboundary problem. So if you think that in my country this is not going to be a problem for us, we don't need to do this, it doesn't mean that you'd be spared from the impacts. And the impacts of plastic pollution are not just the visible pollution that you see. There's also a lot of issues of climate change, related to climate change, because it does contribute to greenhouse gas emissions as well, the burning of plastics. So these are problems that will continue to affect all of us as a continent. And I think it's about time that we came up with a bigger solution. So these policies can no longer work at national level. We should also really start thinking about regional policies and continental policies. that really would help us to quickly solve this problem as a community. I'll leave more to the other panelists. I don't exhaust everything.
All right, thank you, Gloria. I mean, what I get from what you're saying is that inaction cannot be allowed. That's all I'm hearing from you, that inaction cannot be allowed in the fight against plastics. Thank you very much. Juvenile, what do we do? Do we all move to Rwanda now, or we create our own Rwanda?
Of course. I think not only the panelists, but all those who are actually in this particular platform today. I think one of the things that we need to do is just to document the best practices that has been, where these things has been working. Like, for example, Rwanda. When I read some of the studies, sometimes they say Rwanda is a torch when it comes to plastic waste management in Africa. So yeah, we, like a country, we are ready to, let me talk on behalf of the government, of course. I know always Rwanda is welcoming every, I would say, country or organization that needs to come and learn on what has been happening, all the struggles, and also the opportunities that comes out of it. And also I would say the good that has come out of the ban of such particular plastics. So yeah, we are ready to document. We are documenting it, of course, and also we are ready to share it. But again, as also mentioned by Gloria, this is a transboundary issue. For example, if Rwanda is really making up around this, the neighboring countries sometimes are not doing it. And how do we put regional policies, and how governments are we ready to kind of adopt such kind of policies? So this is one of the questions that we should ask ourselves, and to see how better and what are the ways we should use to kind of introduce such kind of policies, not only regionally, but also on continental level. You know that various countries have been now trying to kind of tell the UN organizations that they need to put a treaty around plastic waste. So this is to kind of emphasize on the fact that globally we need such kind of, I would say, policy that would guide every country on what they need to do and what process they would adopt around that particular policy. So yeah, that is one. Two, of course, where in countries where I know the policies have been adopted, but they are yet to be implemented. Yes, for such countries, please try to document some of the areas that at least we could tell the plastic industries that at least if you stop this, there is something that the communities, those who are marginalized, they will get as an advantage from there. And then giving such kind of, I would say, advantages over disadvantages, then I think those countries will be quick to adopt and to implement such kind of things. And to those that are yet to even adopt or pass such kind of bans, please, you are polluting entirely not only your country but entirely the globe. And also, please understand that if you are still polluting, a lot of aquatic life is really, having issue around that. And again, we're also having economic issues in your countries. Yes, I have to tell you that at least where this has been happening, there is also economic value around that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So one of the key things I took from what you said is countries working together and hopefully even having a regional policy around banning plastics. Thank you. Bezawit, you have the last words. What do we do from here?
For me, it's about taking the next feasible small step that we can take to foster innovation. I would say supporting the currently flourishing business accelerators and incubation hubs in one way or another, whichever direction that we can be of help, mentor them and coach the entrepreneurs and innovators in this ecosystem who are already there or who wants to be part of it in any part of Africa, to come up with a good solution, I would say. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Those are really great last words to hear. So thank you once again. The panel discussion is it's done. Please, if we couldn't get to your question, don't worry. We'll be giving out our summary very soon, and we'll respond to your questions in the summary reports that we give. I also want you to know that there's Eco Ahmed Solution has what we call the Green Living Chats. It's a podcast, so we keep the conversations going on environmental issues. You would see a link to it in the chat. Please click on it and then do follow that for us. You get to have a lot of information here from diverse participants that do come discuss their experiences, their knowledge with us on environmental issues. So with that being said, and I want to say thank you for keeping with us. I know we've gone a little bit beyond the time that we had slated, but we're getting to the end. We're going to call on Mr. David Ewusu-Mensah, who is a member of the AFRICER team and also the host of the podcast, to give us the closing remarks. David?
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for sticking around till this time. I'm going to make this very brief because our time is already fast spent. There's been a lot discussed in today's session, and I really find it very difficult to really summarize this. And I hope that we are all going to get back to the recording on YouTube. We'll be sharing it with you later to just recap everything. But what we want to say briefly is that I'll leave you with a few points that I just put out here. We will all realize that there is a big importance that has been laid on education. And as Anderson shared earlier, education. It seems to be very important in every plastic waste management policy or strategy that we implement. It has become a little bit obvious from this discussion that we all know that plastic is not an enemy. But the obvious way that we are producing, using, and disposing is becoming the problem. And so whichever strategy that a country adapts should actually involve all the stakeholders right from the grassroots to the top and the opposite way in order to make the strategy work. Because the worst thing that we don't want to see is that we implement strategies or we implement policies and at the end we find ourselves wanting and they are actually not working and we have to go back. It has also become very obvious that whatever strategy that we implement, we really have to work in the background before we initiate it. So whether it's been a policy, it's been alternative strategies or whatever that it is, we definitely have to work well towards it before we implement it. So I would like to say thank you to you all for coming, especially to our guests. Speakers, we really appreciate, because Saturday is very difficult to get you guys to spend your afternoon with us. We really appreciate you, and to you all we say thank you so much for coming. And just as we've already outlined, we are continuing this conversation on the Green Living Chat podcast, and if you would like to join this conversation or listen or even want to be interviewed on the strategies that you are implementing, please email us. It's already in the show in the chats, and we will engage with you and we would love to have a conversation with you. But with my last words, I would like to say that let's not let this stick with a conversation, not only on platforms like this, but we would like to challenge you that you should go out there, collaborate with people, engage in conversations, and let's see these things that we've talked about happening on the ground. Because we are used to seeing people having conversations and not seeing these things work exactly on the ground. So we challenge you, go out there, start an initiative, collaborate with people, partner with the government institutions, the local governments, the local people, and let's see change happen. And remember, the plastic is not the enemy, but our attitude towards it is becoming a challenge. And definitely we can all come together and work our way through. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much, David, for throwing that challenge to us. it's a worthy one that we would all have to contribute our quota to ensure that we are fighting plastic waste on the continent. Let's do our bit, as David has tasked us to do. So this is the end of today's webinar. And as we said initially, this is a webinar series. So we'll be coming your way again very soon with another webinar. We would love to have you here. We would love to hear your suggestions, your opinions on how this one went, and things you feel we could improve on, things that we could do better, things that you want us to maintain. So from the AFRICER team, I want to say thank you for coming. We are very, very, very grateful. Enjoy the rest of the day. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay. Thank you, Gloria. Well, maybe we can stay on a bit. Juvenile, Gloria, and Beza, please stay on a bit.
Okay.